The following was compiled at the request of the New Jersey Live Steamers Board of Directors. It is intended to both educate new members and fortify the knowledge of existing members. Safety is the primary goal with everything we do at New Jersey Live Steamers. This is especially true when around any of our railroads. In the first part of this presentation, we will cover items applicable to all of our railroads. Much of that information, however, may also apply to operations at other clubs or private railroads you may have the opportunity to visit. At every railroad you visit or operate on, safety is the most important priority. Be aware of your surroundings. This holds true everywhere at the club, but particularly when around the tracks and equipment of the railroad. Tripping hazards are everywhere. The equipment is sometimes large and heavy. If you are not careful, you could get hurt, even hurt very badly. First, I want to familiarize you with one of the basic parts of a railroad, the track switch or turnout. If you don't know what it is, you're in the wrong hobby. A switch controls the movement of equipment from a single track to or from two tracks. If you have to report a problem with a switch, it is helpful to know the basic parts of the switch. First, we have the points of the switch. They are the movable part of the turnout and are usually controlled by some form of operating rod. Secondly, we have the closure rails. Third, we have the running rails. In this case, it's the wing rail. In this case, it's the stock rail. Next, we have the guard rails, one in each direction. Third, we have the frog. The frog is the one point of the switch that may cause you the most problems. The grooves cut in the frog are just the depth of the flanges of your wheels. The slightest obstacle in the frog may cause you to derail. If you are traveling in a right to left pattern, you are following through the points or trailing through the points. Therefore, it is a trailing point switch. If you are traveling left to right, you are facing the points of the switch. Therefore, it is called a facing point switch. Signals are used on both of the NJLS ground level railroads. They are there for the protection of people and the safe operation of the railroad and should be observed. The following signals are common throughout both hobby and prototype railroads to one extent or another. In this slide, we show the common green signal. Proceed at a safe speed when you see the green signal. Every railroad has its own definition of a safe speed. Common sense should prevail. Always be aware of what is taking place around you at all times. Here we have a single yellow signal. Proceed at a restricted speed. The signal is also telling you the next signal will be a red signal. A side note, all of your signals will be to the right of an engineer. If the signal is to your left, it is not applicable to your movement. Here we have a yellow over red signal. This is indicating that you proceed at a restricted speed because the switch ahead of you is set for a diverging route. You can proceed at a restricted speed. Here we have a single red signal. Only one red is visible. For that red, the common procedure is to stop, then proceed at a slow speed, prepared to stop. It is telling you the next block is occupied. Here we have a red over red signal. This signal is an absolute stop. It is telling you that the switch ahead of you is turned against you. The trailing point switch ahead of you is against you. You must stop. Here is a slightly different type of signal. It is commonly called a dwarf signal. On our railroad, there's only two. They're used on the Y lead track, and they indicate switch position, not track occupancy. If it is yellow, it indicates the switch is in your favor. Proceed at a reduced speed. If it is a red, it indicates the switch ahead of you is not in your favor. Do not continue. Next, we have some simple visual and audible signals. Here are basic signals mostly, but not exclusively used on the 1.5" scale railroad. The hand signals themselves are used primarily during meets when a yard master or a yard crew member is present. Top left is the simple stop signal, where you move your hand or a lit item, like a lantern, horizontally. The middle one is proceed forward with relative to the front of the locomotive. It is usually by raising and lowering your hand or a lit lantern of some sort to indicate a forward movement is requested. The right hand one is a circular pattern. Your arm or hand is used in a circular pattern or a lantern, and this indicates to proceed in a reverse direction relative to the front of the locomotive. During meets, you will also see another signal used by the yard crew. When we give you the stop signal, we also hold up a fist indicating stop where you are and stay there. Hold in that position. Here are some of the commonly accepted horn or whistle signals, and the use of which is up to the discretion of the engineer. However, if there is people around, it is a good idea to use them for safety reasons. The single toot indicates that the train has stopped and the brakes are set. It is safe to get on or off the train at that time. Two toots are usually used when the train is about to move in a forward direction relative to the front of the locomotive. Three toots is commonly used when the train is about to move in a reverse direction relative to the front of the locomotive. Your most common signal, used on prototypes as well, is the long, long, short, and long signal used at grade crossings. At some clubs that have such a feature, a single toot is common when entering or exiting a tunnel or approaching a long bridge. This is a safety measure to indicate that you are either coming into the tunnel or exiting the tunnel or crossing the long bridge, to make sure no one is in your way exiting the tunnel or working inside the tunnel. We now come to the switches or turnouts and their control systems at New Jersey Live Steamers. First, at NJLS, assume no switch is a spring switch, except the four mentioned later in this presentation. Some club layouts use spring switches extensively, but not at NJLS. When approaching a facing point switch, left to right in this diagram, the points will determine the route of travel. From this point on, we will be referring to switches or turnouts on the 1.5" scale railroad. A switch is said to be in its normal or clear position when set for the normal flow of traffic. Its reverse position is the diverging route from the normal flow of traffic. This is an overall view of the 1.5" layout. For purposes of yard operation, the switches in the yard are numbered from east to west, and the numbers are reflected on the various switch control boxes. Let's begin with crossover number 1 from the outside main to the inside main, and crossover number 2 from the inside main to the yard running track. A side note, a crossover involves two switches, where both switches are operated on together at the same time. Crossovers number 1 and 2 are the first two we'll talk about. Crossover number 1 is the crossover between the outside and the inside main. Remember, with a crossover, both switches are operated simultaneously. Crossover number 2 is the crossover between the inside main and the yard lead or yard running track. Push button number 1 will activate just crossover number 1, both switches. Button number 2, or the blue button, will operate the two switches for the crossover from the inside main to the yard lead. If you depress the red button, both crossovers will be activated simultaneously. The green button will clear both crossovers. Make sure whatever movement is being made is clear of both crossovers before you depress the green button to clear both crossovers. But please remember to push the green buttons on all your switch control boxes after you have completed your move. Above every control button box, there is a diagram showing you what the individual buttons do and how they act upon the switches themselves. Also, every control button has a duplicate, at least one other one. This is the normal one facing east on the outside main. There's another one up here by the bridge facing west. The buttons on all your control boxes will face the switches they control. For the moment, we're going to skip talking about the double slip switch or the puzzle switch, and we're going to go to switch 6 and switch 7. Switch 6 is the switch controlling the track from the yard track to the inside main. Just west of it, switch 7 is the switch controlling the inside main to the car barn ladder or yard track. Switch 7 is slightly different in that its normal position is the curved route rather than the straight route. Switch 6 is depressed by the 6 button. Switch 7 is by pushing the blue button. The red button will reverse both. The green button will clear both switches. Again, you have the descriptive box below the buttons, and the buttons are facing the switches they control. Switch 6 and 7 have 3 control boxes. This one is on the back side going up the outside main. Again, switch 6, switch 7, and the red controlling both, the green restoring both. Down here on the inside main, you have your 3rd control button. Switch 7 is the blue button. Switch 6 is the yellow button. Red reverses both of them. Green clears or normalizes both of them. And you have your descriptive box below it. Next, we go to switch 8 and crossover number 9. Switch number 8 controls traffic on the connector track going into the yard lead or to the inside main. That is a commonly used switch for coming into the yard from the inside main. Crossover number 9 controls 2 switches, goes from the inside main to the connector track, which would take you up to the outside main. This particular set of switches or crossovers is commonly used when somebody is in the yard and wants to go to the outside main. Again, the switches are duplicated at the top of the hill and down here. Yellow button is for switch 8. Blue button is for crossover number 9. The red button selects both of them. And the green button clears both of them. Again, you have your descriptive plate, this time above the switches. Next, we'll talk about switch number 10 at the top of the hill on the outside main. Switch 10 used to be a spring switch, but is no longer. It is now a controlled switch. Switch 10 is at the top of the hill again on the outside main. Single button set either at the top of the hill or on the upgrade of the hill itself. Controls the lead from the ladder track in the yard to the outside main or the outside main itself. Next, we'll talk about the double slip switch. Switch controls number 4 and 5, commonly called the puzzle switch. Double slip switch is actually two switches. Control number 4 and control number 5. However, the best way to look at this switch, two independent switches. The control on the right controls the switch on the left, number 4. If you are standing here, looking west, look at this like a simple switch. Normal position is straight. Reverse position is the track going to the inside main. Switch lever number 5 controls the switch on the right. Lever number 5 controls either the running track in the yard or the track going into the two tracks leading to the transfer table. Remember, switch 4 covers the left-hand direction. Lever 5 controls the right-hand or eastbound direction. On both control stands, there is a diagram showing you what each lever does. It should not be too difficult to understand. Again, look at it as two individual switches. Number 5 controls the eastbound two tracks. Yard lead going to the transfer table. Number 4 controls the western movement. Track going to the inside main or track on the yard level tracks. Again, as two simple switches, it is not that hard. Now we look at the switches in front of the clubhouse, basically on the inside loop. These switches, although not numbered, do have control buttons and, as usual, are facing the switches they control. The lower one, simple green and red, controls the switch from the inside loop track to the passing track on the inside loop. This too is repeated up by the signal on the inside loop. The middle button controls the switch to your left, the switch that is from the yard running track to the Y lead track. Going around across the bridge to the Y lead. That too is repeated up here on the Y lead track. There is the dwarf signal we mentioned before. The top button on the same control stand, again facing the switch it controls the switch on the passing track of the inside loop. This is commonly used when you're either coming in or out of the yard, or if you're going to go around the Y. As with every other switch, this has another control box. Most people don't know about it. It is up on the opposite side of the signal bridge overhead of the two tracks, and again is facing the switch it controls. Here we have the Libertyville Cafe switch. Again, you have your single set of buttons. The red button selects your route to the left-hand track. The green button selects your route to the right-hand track. Again, this button is repeated up here, just past the two switches, in case you need to reverse or change the switch. A side note, this switch is very slow moving. Very slow. So when you are approaching the switch, make your selection for whichever route you want to take, and then wait for the mechanism to complete its cycle. Here we have what is commonly called the snap switch. This is unique in that it does not have buttons, and there's only one of them. This controls the switch on the outside main, going around to the outside main itself, or going into the station track. This switch is just the opposite of the station track switches. It is very fast. Moving this arm, which is a rubber-ended arm, to the left will take you into the station, and that switch will throw very quickly. Moving the switch to the right will continue you on the outside main track. Next we have your basic switch again, but this time we're talking about spring switches. Spring switches are always trailing point switches. With a spring switch, you are going from the right to the left at each occasion. If you must move from the left to the right on a spring switch, you must lock the switch for the facing point movement, and once you are completing the movement, you must reset the switch to the spring position. There are 4 spring switches on the layout. The first, most common one is the one exiting the 2 tracks in the Libertyville station. The second one is the switch exiting the Libertyville station complex onto the outside main. The third one is exiting the 2 tracks in front of the car clubhouse, the main or the passing track. This one is commonly used as a facing point switch when your train is too long and you're wanting to make the run around the Y track. The fourth switch is at the top of the connector track on the outside main. This is a common ground throw type mechanism. This particular example is on a spring switch. You'll notice the control lever is in the upright or vertical position. That allows you to go through the switch as a trailing point switch, left to right only. If you must make a move through a spring switch, you must throw the lever to one position or the other, depending on which route you want to take from right to the left or facing points. But remember, if it was a spring switch, you must return the lever to its upright or vertical position once you have completed your move. Remember, when all is said and done, safety is your number one priority. Everywhere at the club, but especially at the railroads. Nobody wants to get hurt or hurt another person. Be aware of your surroundings and everything that is going on around you or may be affected by your actions. Remember, at New Jersey Live Steamers, safety is Rule 1. Be safe and enjoy the hobby. If you have any questions, please direct them to any member of the Board of Directors. This presentation was compiled by Ronald Heller. Thank you for watching and enjoy.